The more I learn about Israel and Palestine, the more firm I am that Hamas is not the root cause of this conflict. It is the oppression and occupation of the Palestinian people. And so if you just address Hamas, you do not obtain any lasting peace for both the people of Palestine and the people of Israel. My first reaction when I heard about October 7th was shock. It was, oh my God, that's horrible. That was a massacre. Then it was, why did this happen? What were the events that led to this?
Because these kinds of things don't just happen in a vacuum.
And you keep pulling on that thread. And it's like Hamas was in power. Why were they in power? Why are they this terrorist extremist organization that the people of the Gaza Strip decided to elect into positions of power? Why does Hamas exist at all? You keep going back in time. And so my understanding, and please correct me if any of this is wrong, even well before Nazi Germany or the lead up to World War II, Europe was not a safe place for Jewish people. The book on Zionism was written to say the Jewish people need a place to be safe because it's not in Europe, was written in 1896. And the book on Zionism said that places Jewish people could go to be safe were like, I think it was Argentina and Uganda, but also Palestine. One of the reasons he picked Palestine as a place was, yes, the whole Holy Land thing, was because Palestine was in the Ottoman Empire, which was a safer place for Jewish people than Europe was. And so when I look at today and I hear that Israel's the only place that Jewish people can be safe in the Middle East, I'm like, well, what changed? As things got worse and anti-Semitism increased leading up to World War II, Germany and the Holocaust, Zionist military forces in 1948 ethnically cleansed the land of almost 1 million people to make way for this state, this Zionist state.
And the leaders of those Zionist forces would go on to become the leaders of Israel once it was founded.
Now, I need to be clear when I say Zionism, that is not the same group of people as when I say Jews. They do overlap sometimes, but they are two different groups of people. The idea of Zionism, as I said, didn't come about until 1896, while Judaism has been around for thousands of years. There's a Wikipedia page that has a dated list of war crimes committed against Palestinians, and the dated list starts in 1948. This was when the war crimes against Palestinians began. And then 20 years after that, much like Israel committed the first act of violence in an armed conflict in June of 2025 against Iran, in 1967, Israel committed the first act of violence, the Six-Day War that ended with Israel's armed occupation of both Palestinian territories. So that's when the occupation began. And it wasn't for 20 years after that was Hamas even founded. If I were to say, well, why does Hamas exist? I think the pro-Israel sentiment is, well, Hamas exists because they're religious fundamentalists, because they're terrorists. They're just bad people. You know, you can see their anti-heaven liberation and oppression, but that's an effect. That's not a cause. I can see why, for 40 years of oppression and 20 years of occupation, why the people might be driven to extremism.
And I feel the need to clarify here. I'm not trying to justify the actions of Hamas. I'm trying to figure out why they happened so that we can drill down and get to the root cause.
Now, you also have to remember the fact that Israel, at best, indirectly supported and allowed the Islamist militant groups that would go on to become Hamas to flourish, and at worst directly funded those groups and or Hamas as a way of undermining the Palestinian Authority, where the Palestinian Authority was a nonviolent organization devoted to civil administration, to obtaining liberation and security for the Palestinian people. And Israel didn't want that. So Israel propped up, indirectly or directly, Hamas as a way of undermining nonviolent administration. And so any conversation around, well, this group of people is just so bad, they're so violent, it doesn't talk about the events that led up to the creation of Hamas and the fact that Israel, directly or indirectly, provided Hamas or supported Hamas with the resources that it could use to go on to commit October 7th. Is not a complete conversation. It is an addressing of the effect and not the cause. And so based on this, if I could snap my fingers right now and produce every member of Hamas's body to Israel, whether it's custody or whether they're all dead, and I could prove to Israel, you don't have to carpet bomb and starve a population of people as part of a genocide that you're committing anymore. I'm not convinced Israel would stop at this point. And then you put the Gaza Strip back in the living conditions it was in before October 7th, you do not end this conflict in any meaningful way. I tend to align with Martin Luther King, who said that you cannot use violence to achieve permanent peace. You use violence, and if you win, you either completely eliminate the other side, such that there is no more resistance, or you batter the other side so much into submission, and you let their hate grow. You condense that hate into the group of people who are left alive, leading to them hating you longer and harder than they ever have before. In fact, I would say if you go back to the conditions of either Palestinian territory before October 7th and you don't address the occupation and the oppression, you get Hamas either coming back or you get a worse version of Hamas. Not because the people are just so violent and bad, because you haven't addressed the root cause of the conflict, which is the oppression and the occupation of the Palestinian people. If you're ever going to get to lasting peace, you have to provide liberation. Now, that's step one. You can't provide liberation and be like, fine, govern yourself, while there still exists this massive power dynamic between Israel and the Gaza Strip or the West Bank. Israel is backed by the largest economic and military and propaganda machine in the United States that the world has ever seen. They have a seat at the United Nations. The civilians have the ability to fly out of their country if they want to. Israel's administration has the ability to determine whether or not their civilians get basic human necessities like food and medicine. And the Gaza Strip doesn't have any of these things. Israel controls its not only borders on the ground, but the airspace and the seas. As this most recent leg of the conflict has shown us, Israel gets to effectively flip a switch and decide whether or not the people of Palestine can get food or medicine or fuel or electricity. The Gaza Strip does not have the same level of seat. I think it's more like an observer seat as Israel has at the United Nations. It doesn't have a formal military. And so if you provide liberation, you need to also flood the Gaza Strip and the West Bank with resources such that they can have their own government, such that they can dictate the living conditions for themselves, what their territories should have, how the people should live in those territories, such that they can defend themselves, such that Israel doesn't feel like they can do whatever the fuck they want to the Gaza Strip, and there basically won't be consequences because either Palestinian territory are not equipped to defend themselves. And you have to give them a seat at the United Nations to have a say in world affairs, especially ones like ceasefire proposals where Israel and the United States can just shut them down and Palestine can't do anything about it. I wouldn't really care if Zionism was a movement based in protecting Jewish people or protecting Christians or Islam or any other religion. I don't believe that committing war crimes and genocide is necessary to uphold any religion, especially not one of those three religions, which are religions of peace. I also feel like I'm sometimes met with animosity when I say free Palestine. It's like, you just want Jews to die. You don't like Jews, and that's why you think Palestinians should be freed, because Hamas has in their charter that they want to kill Jewish people. The answer to that is no, I do not. I stand firmly against anti-Semitism. I stand firmly against anyone who feels the need to harass Jewish people because of the actions of the state of Israel, or vandalize Jewish institutions like synagogues. But you also have to remember that supporting Israel is Zionism, that Israel's actions in Palestine since Israel's existence are acts of Zionism, which wasn't even invented until 1896. And so there is a growing population of Jewish people who say we are not Zionists, or they are anti-Zionists, and they believe that the only way to obtain lasting peace for both Israel and Palestine is through the liberation of the Palestinian people. And this population of people is rightfully pissed off that Israel is saying, in the name of Judaism, I have to do these things. Remember that Zionism and Judaism are two very different things.